Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a comparison between the Sony A6500 on the left, which you can see is paired right now, with the full-frame G Master 100 to 400 millimeter piece of glass, an expensive piece, but there's a reason it's attached, to the brand new RX10 Mark IV. So $1,700 gets you this bridge-style camera with a 1-inch sensor, 24 to 600 millimeter 35 millimeter equivalent piece of Carl Zeiss glass, and really everything under the sun feature-wise, but of course its limitation being that it has a 1-inch sensor and no interchangeable lenses. The A6500, which currently I believe is selling for around $1,400 US, it may be less. You're looking at one of the most impressive mirrorless APS-C cameras ever made, 425 phase detection, autofocus points on sensor. So basically the fastest APS-C mirrorless camera ever made. It has 5-axis image stabilization, something that the RX10 Mark IV does not have. But of course, with all of that taken into account, both have Wi-Fi and NFC, both have touch to focus on their screens. They are not touch screens, but touch to focus capability. Both have a hot shoe, both have great EVFs, both have built-in flash, and there is a drastic size difference. Obviously, if you can pretend that's not there, the A6500 is tiny compared to the body that the RX10 sports, but the RX10 Mark IV is a one-and-done package. This is all that you need in order to essentially achieve the same focal range that you're seeing right here, with no wide end. Of course, you would need another lens. Again, this is full frame 100 to 400 millimeter lens. It is a gargantuan. It is very expensive. You're spending well over $2,000 on just this piece of glass alone. So I put it on there just to give you an idea of how much you'd have to spend. Again, $1,400, maybe less. It'll go on sale. Maybe it'll be $1,200 for this body one of these days. And then I think it was $2,500 lens, somewhere around there, $2,400, $2,500. Does it really matter? The whole point is that it makes the $1,700 you're spending on the RX10 Mark IV look like a drop in the bucket. And all you'll need to pick up are extra batteries and SD cards. Now, both have fantastic performance. There's no question about it. Is the 5-axis image stabilization in the A6500 as good as that found in the A7R Mark II? Absolutely not. I think that has to do with the fact that its body size is as small as it is. I think that's one of the key components, one of the key reasons that it doesn't have as good image stabilization. The RX10 Mark IV, on the other hand, does not have the 5-axis image stabilization. That's something I'm hoping we'll see in the 5th gen. But what the RX10 does have this year is phase detection. Now, only 315 phase detection points compared to the 425 over here. But in continuous shooting, you're looking at 24 frames per second, where the A6500, which was the king of mirrorless until the A9 came out, even though the A9 is full frame, yes, I know this, 11 frames per second. So again, 11 frames per second continuous, 24. They both have generous buffers, not quite, unlimited, but pretty good. You're looking at like 300 shots on each before these buffers are going to fill. So that's very good. Only a single slot on each, but one key element that I think a lot of you will appreciate is that the RX10 Mark IV has an advantage when it comes to I/O ports. It actually, here on the left-hand side of the body, has microphone and a headphone jack, a microphone and headphone jack, HDMI, and micro USB, or other known as multi-port, whereas the A6500, as I spin this beast around, only has a multi-port HDMI and a microphone jack. So no way to monitor audio with the A6500. Wi-Fi and NFC are on both. And as I mentioned, very similar in terms of overall specifications. Of course, the A6500 interchangeable lens which means that not only do you have that larger APS-C size sensor with better dynamic range, you have what should be on paper a superior autofocus system, and in my experience, for the most part, it is, but you don't have the speed with that autofocus system that you have here. So while you have a better autofocus system in the A6500, the speed that you gain with the RX10 Mark IV may actually perform better for you depending on your actual needs, as interesting as that may be. Also, bear in mind, as I mentioned at the top of the video, that the A6500, even though it's less expensive than the Mark IV on the right, it inherently will be more expensive once you add up the lenses that you would need in order to cover this 24 to 600 millimeter range. Furthermore, you will not have power zoom using the A6500, something that does make this really a hybrid video camera, still camera, everything in one, which is one of the many reasons the RX10 line has been so popular and has continued to thrive now in its 4th generation. So should you go with the A6500 or should you go with the RX10 Mark IV? Well, this is difficult to answer because if carrying extra lenses is a non-issue, if you've got the budget, then I say by all means go with the A6500 because they are so close in price, and to get the lenses you need may not necessarily set you back the amount that I've mentioned. You don't necessarily need to get this giant zoom. You can, stick with standard APS-C lenses. Now, you will be limited in terms of their reach. You're not going to find an APS-C lens that's going to give you this sort of reach. But on the other hand, you may not need that because here you do have a 24 megapixel APS-C sensor that when it comes to cropping, you're going to have more photographic detail to actually utilize than you do from the 1-inch sensor found inside the RX10 Mark IV. So that's something to take into account. No different than the 5-axis image stabilization. You gain stops just like you do with the A7R Mark II, and you certainly get smoother video footage than you do out of this camera, at least when it's on its long end. Wide shooting, no problems. The EVFs are very close in terms of quality. I do prefer the center EVF. That's a personal preference. I'm not a big fan of the left eye, the right eye that it favors, since I am a left eye shooter. I am left eye dominant, so that always leaves me pressing my face against the screen, but that's something specific to me. So that's where I'll always pick a camera. Not always, not if it's inferior, but if it's competent, I'll always want the EVF to be center mounted and protruding, as opposed to compact and to the left, and my face is now part of the camera screen. In terms of other things you should be aware of, they both use the exact same W series battery, and battery life is very similar between these two cameras. You're looking at somewhere around 400 shots just on still. If you get into hybrid, aka still and video mode, then it's your mileage may vary. In fact, it will. In my experience, so far, it appears the RX10 Mark IV is a little bit more efficient. It does have some newer technology under the hood. The A6500 is by no means old. It came out, this year, so it's not an old camera. Still, in my opinion, the best bang for the buck in the interchangeable lens world, no question about it. Mirrorless aside, it cannot be matched. No competition out there for the A6500, in my opinion. But the RX10 Mark IV, when it comes to convenience, and those of you that are really contemplating whether or not you want to invest in a lot of either native APS-C or full frame E-mount glass, or let's say you even already have, you may want to ditch the gear bag, this is the way to do it. And these are relatively close, even though the APS-C is still substantially larger, that 24 megapixel sensor. They are very close when you start cropping. I will tell you that now. Comparing the RX10 Mark IV to a full frame camera, not as close, clearly, but these two, very close. And that's because when you do 100% crop, even on an APS-C sensor, things are going to deteriorate with 24 megapixels. Do it with something like the A7R Mark II with 42 megapixels, different story. So is the dynamic range. So really what this comes down to is how light do you want to travel, and how important is it to you to have the convenience to not miss the shot? Because that's what I really see in the RX10 Mark IV, is that with that 24 frames per second, all of the features basically that you already have here on the A6500, but none of the baggage, both figuratively and literally. Both have access to the Play Memory Store, and the fact that they both take the same batteries means you might want both. In fact, if I were to recommend an interchangeable lens camera, best bang for the buck, and a bridge style camera, also best bang for the buck, you're looking at these two. I mean, these are rock stars, in my opinion, both cameras. And that's why choosing between them is very difficult, because neither is bad. Both are, in fact, fantastic. The key difference, of course, being, do you want to carry a collection of lenses? And if you do want prime lenses, then clearly your choice has to be the interchangeable lens camera. If, however, you've already shot with prime lenses and find that you aren't necessarily always leaning on your primes, and you're finding that you're using your zoom options more often, then you got to give the RX10 Mark IV a shot, now that it has the autofocus system of an interchangeable lens camera. And that's the beauty of the RX10 Mark IV, is that it's a bridge style camera with the performance of an interchangeable lens camera, and a lens that would really cost a fortune if, like this one, it was interchangeable. So these are things you have to take into account. I've covered battery life, I've covered the EVF, hot shoe, flash, image stabilization. The 4K video out of both of these is superb, but the truth of the matter is the RX10 is really also a video camera. The A6500 is not a video camera. It is absolutely a still camera first. And that's the thing about the RX10 Mark IV and every RX10 before it, is that it's always been aimed at being both a still and video camera. Now, don't get me wrong, it is also a still camera first, but ultimately the fact that it has a power zoom that is inaudible to the stereo microphone array here and can be slowed down, sped up in the menu settings, ends up really giving you the best of both worlds. You can't do that with the A6500. Sure, you can get cinema type lenses to attach to it that are, servo, power zooms, but you still will not achieve the same results. And more importantly for me, the convenience that the RX10 Mark IV has. Now, take away this autofocus system, the A6500 wins. And in fact, if you go back to my review where I compared the A6500 to the RX10 Mark III, the thing I had to give to the RX10 Mark III was its convenience. That's what it was. Now I can actually say the RX10 Mark IV that we're looking at here is more than just convenience. I mean, even from a comfort of shooting standpoint, no differently than in my comparison with the A7R Mark III, the fact that the video button is located where your thumb would like to go rather than where your thumb wouldn't, which is right here, which may have been Sony's biggest faux pas, designing their mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras over the years, which they've now addressed. The brand new A7R Mark III has followed suit with the A9, but these are their Pro models, relocating the video button from the corner where it made really no sense to the center of the camera, which is exactly where it is here on the RX10 Mark IV. So just a few things to take into account. Now, in terms of the actual zoom fully extended, I just want to show you exactly what that looks like so you have an idea, and I'm going to do that right now. So there we are at 600 millimeters. And you start to see that it's almost as long as that full frame G Master 100 to 400 piece of glass. Of course, nowhere near the weight, nowhere near the size, nowhere near the cost, but almost the same length. And of course, you can throw on an ND filter, And it truly is, a video camera. And then you do also have clear image zoom on here, just like you do here, so that you can actually go even further. So I should say farther. Let's speak English, right? So it really is an incredibly impressive camera, one that I did not think would make me consider giving up the A6500, but it puts you in a position where at its price, $1,700, $1,400 or less, and then lenses for this, even if you just have the pancake kit to begin with, so you're getting, that limited range, 16 to I think it's 50. I'm brain farting here for a moment. It's just not something you can compare to the RX10 and its fixed lens with that 24 to 600 reach. Now, again, that is a 35 millimeter equivalent. Even its aperture, that f2.4 to 4, if we put it into full frame or APS-C terms, is not literal, of course. You have a crop factor there. I'm not getting into that because that's really not what this video is about. It's about comparing two photographic tools that are both very good, best in class, and even though this is a cyber shot, which means it's not meant to attract the same customers as an interchangeable lens camera, I assure you it is doing exactly that. And I already have comments on my previously uploaded videos of people asking whether or not they should give up something like their A7R Mark II. I haven't seen anyone directly reference the A6500, or maybe I have and I'm just forgetting, but these are legitimate questions, and that's because all of a sudden we have a bridge camera with the autofocus system of an interchangeable lens camera. And that is, or at least for me, always has been something that I wished would come to fruition. And here we do have it with the RX10 Mark IV. Mark III didn't have it. It had the new telephoto reach of 600 millimeters, did not have an autofocus system that had the chops for me to legitimately tell you that I would pick this over this. Now, I already own them, right? So that's another thing. I could return the brand new RX10 Mark IV, but I can already tell you that's not going to happen. I'm going to be selling my RX10 Mark III, which I repurchased. This was part of all of the gear that got destroyed by Hurricane Matthew. Those of you that follow my channel know my life kind of got wrecked for a year because my house was destroyed right after I moved into it. But all of that aside, having repurchased all of the gear, it's something where, again, owning both of these, and I already did a comparison of the A7R Mark II to this camera as well, I have to say, convenience trumps, for lack of a better word, wish that wasn't the word that I used, the flexibility of the interchangeable lens system. And that's because ultimately, I know that if I'm traveling, whatever it may be, this is a run and gun dream. You're never going to take this out and be saying to yourself, oh, I wish I had this, I wish I had that, because you pretty much have everything here. I mean, the 24 wide end is wide enough that you can take pretty much any landscape shot you want. Of course, it's not going to get as wide as my full frame, Zeiss 16 to 35, but it's going to get enough. And then on the long end, the 600 millimeters combined with the clear image zoom, forget about digital zoom because I'm not going to even bring that up, it gives you a reach that you need this puppy in order to accomplish. So that's the sort of flexibility I like, as long as we're not sacrificing image quality. And believe it or not, the 20 megapixel 1-inch sensor that Sony's been leaning on now ever since they developed the first RX100 and trickled down into what is now the Mark V and soon the Mark VI and the RX10 line, it's been brilliant for a reason. Most point-and-shoot cameras have gone the way of the Dodo. I think, most people are aware of that. People think that their phones are their cameras, and I understand why. It's about convenience, and that's exactly why this is a beast, because if you're looking for convenience, if you want flexibility, if you want a camera that can do it all, and you're not going to be carrying with you on vacation or even on a hike, wherever it may be, a concert, this is going to be a dream to use. This, on the other hand, you're switching lenses, You're doing things that you just can't do here. Whereas if you notice, this is on auto, this is on auto, this is going to outperform its interchangeable counterpart in auto. And there's a reason. It's marketed to a crowd that will use auto, but will also like to do anything manually. It's for everyone. This, on the other hand, by nature of being interchangeable, is asking users to either already have knowledge or be prepared to gain it. So I'll say it once, I'll say it twice. The RX10 Mark IV is baggage free, figuratively and literally. The A6500, an amazing piece of kit, but you are going to need a lot of elements in order to achieve what you want, either in the still or video world, when it comes down to your lens selections. And yes, you can use legacy glass with adapters, no question about it, but if we're talking about fresh money being invested, this is going to get expensive really fast. Here, you know what your damage is, and you probably won't cry when the next big thing comes out because you'll still have some of that money in your pocket. Again, both amazing cameras, but because we actually have nearly the same buffer and nearly the same autofocus prowess now in a fixed lens camera like this with so much flexibility, the RX10 Mark IV is clearly one of my new favorites. And I never thought I'd be saying that about an RX10, but it's happened. I've always liked what Sony brought to the table with the RX10 lineup, and they only progressively got better each year. A lot of people didn't like the fact that they went away from the 200 millimeter fixed aperture, and I understand why, but I think Sony also knew that with the competition they were facing from Panasonic, they needed to bring a longer lens, and they did that. And then they realized they needed better autofocus, and they did that. And hopefully next generation we'll see better stabilization. But until then, the RX10 Mark IV is the camera that if I could only pick one piece of kit to have on me, it would be the camera, because in terms of versatility, flexibility, and overall quality, it really doesn't disappoint me. Now take away that autofocus system and the A6500 or A7R Mark II, I'm going straight to those cameras, because all the bells and whistles don't add up unless they truly end up yielding great results, right? If you don't have a product at the end of the day, then you just have a paperweight, and this is no paperweight. So hope you enjoyed the video. I'm enjoying using the RX10 Mark IV, if that wasn't clear. It's really a great camera, as is the A6500 and everything else I've reviewed in the past. I generally don't try to review pieces of crap. Anyone that follows my channel knows that I don't do that, because that's a waste of my time and yours. And since I don't get paid really to do this, why waste more time? But at any rate, hope you enjoyed the video. Again, the RX10 Mark IV is a winner. So is the A6500. It's all a matter of budget, convenience, and whether or not you have back problems, really, I guess. That's what it boils down to. I just see myself more prone to actually using the RX10 Mark IV than an interchangeable lens camera. Now, I don't shoot weddings. I'm not a portrait photographer. Anyone that does that is definitely going to want to remain, I think, in the interchangeable lens realm, whether we're talking about APS-C, Micro Four Thirds, or full frame, which of course is the most ideal for just about everything. Most advantages that you're going to get as a photographer. But when it comes to still and video, even though these are both great options, again, the fact that the Mark IV has the autofocus prowess of an interchangeable lens camera does make it the new kid on the block that everybody wants to meet. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.